Good. Is that working? Looks like it.
That is working. Look at that backdrop.
Yeah, I put it in the other day. I was doing a talk for a like a big organization, and it didn't like the backdrop, and they said, "Can't you make it look more
like you're there?"
So I put it in, and we go, and everybody says, "Wow, look at that backdrop." So I decided to keep it.
Did you take the photo?
Yeah, it's taken from camp 3 or 4 on K2. So it's looking out. So the pointed one over there, no, over there. That's Mashable. That's K1, and then that one there is Shalatse, first climb. Well, it's where Herman Bull lost his life after making first ascent of Board Peak. So it is my inner mountain geek coming out there. Yeah.
Come on, Kenton. Your mountain geek is out there all the time. There's no inner. There's nothing hidden. You are the mountain man, and it's a pleasure to have you on the show. So thank you so much for joining me.
No, it's a pleasure to be here. It's always nice to talk to new people and to maybe educate or pontificate over mountains and all things performance and high altitude and things like that.
Yeah, but how, like, sitting at home now? Are you at home? Obviously.
Yeah, I'm at home now.
You're home. Sitting at home now, how do you decompress after summiting Everest?
Well, I've been back from Nepal now just over 2 weeks, and it feels like most of that 2 weeks has been mowing the lawn and doing the swimming.
Yeah.
So I've been outside. Literally, I'm coming from swimming now, and I know it sounds ridiculous, but having that space is a huge part of decompressing, because I think the reintegration into what we deem normal society after any big adventure or expedition or whatever it is, it takes time, and certainly as I get older, I find that the challenges that air quotes here, what we call Western society, I start to feel that perhaps we need to have a bit of an introspective look at what that actually stands for. And that's where the biggest issue comes from. It's not so much reintegrating with the family, although my wife would say otherwise, the third child comes home. It's more a case of reintegrating with the flaws of the society that we live in, the capitalist society. And I know that's quite a big issue to start to look at, but literally every time I come back from an expedition, I worry about it, because you come from this stripped back, bare existence. Even these days on Everest, yes, we're connected, we have Wi-Fi at base camp and things like that, but it is a stripped back existence compared with what we have here. And that conflict it generates within me is ever present and ever gnawing away. And that reintegration into society here can be somewhat problematic. So I take myself out and mow the lawn and do the swimming and all the things that have been left to overgrow around the garden.
Yeah. So I mean, obviously, the 16th time that you've summited, does it get harder to integrate back into normality every time? You've obviously got experience in this sort of 2 weeks after the summit, coming home, going through that. Are you seeing the world getting worse? Is that what I'm sort of picking up there, that it gets more difficult every time you return?
I think it does, but I don't think that's a reflection on the expedition itself. I think it's a reflection on my own personal journey. My eyes are definitely more open now than they were when I was younger. I think this is going to sound a little bit sort of egotistical in a way. I think I'm more educated through my own reading and inquisitive nature about the impact that certainly my generation has had on the planet. And yeah, I mean, I do struggle with it a little bit. I struggle with where globally as societies, where we're taking the planet. And I'm part of that. Don't get me wrong. I fly around the world to climb mountains. I know the impact that I have. And I come back and I see the greed. I mean, we were Gordon Gekko in the Hollywood movie Wall Street. Greed is good. Well, honestly, what part of greed is good? it's hard to fathom that at any point we thought that was true, because one of the greatest things we can do for ourselves is be a giver rather than a taker, and greed is just taking, and that's what I see around me when I'm here. We come back from Pakistan or India or Bhutan or anywhere where there are sort of indigenous mountain people, and they have very little, and they give everything. And then you come back to air quote the developed society, and you're like, oh my god, no one's giving it, everybody's taking. And that's but yeah, that's a difficult one to deal with, or I find it difficult. And I'm very much more conscious of that nowadays, and I don't think I ever used to be.
I hear you, and I tend to agree with you. The world we live in is difficult. I've got young children. I know you've got kids, and bringing them up in this world of, sometimes working hard isn't the first thing that's put on them at school. It's the old school day of even when I was a boy and going through life and getting a job and getting a career. You just had to put the time in. You had to work. You couldn't give up. You're obviously in life and death situations. How do you look at what you've achieved through your eyes to sort of give it to your kids? Are they aware of the sort of the scale of magnitude of what you've achieved on the mountains and up Everest, and how are you going to instill that in them?
Yeah, I mean, I think certainly as they get older, there's no getting away from the fact that they now have a better understanding about what daddy does. I think it reached a crescendo maybe 4 years ago, when Saffron would have been, what, 7 or 8. There was like rumors coming back through from school that she was struggling with the fact that daddy's away, and potentially doing something quite dangerous, et cetera, et cetera. And that was that really pulled at my heartstrings, because I'm making that conscious decision to go away. It's it's me deciding that this is going to be my career, because in reality, you could argue that I could do almost anything else if you really want to put your mind to it. But having said that, there is danger everywhere. I don't want to be flippant about that, but if your time is up, your time is up. I could pull out of my driveway here and get T-boned by a passing Arctic or something like that. But I suppose the danger which I confront is arguably more obvious. Is arguably more compelling to young children, because they see it. I think we get dumbed to the danger that's all around us here. I think we've become complacent to it. So I suppose to have to pay respect to the original implications of danger, all we can do on the mountain is mitigate that risk, as best we can, because it's always going to be there. You can never fully take objective danger away. It's one of the things that pulls us to the mountains in the first place. That sense of danger, that sense of adrenaline, that stepping outside the comfort zone, knowing, well, this is what I think anyway, knowing that our actions have consequences, and we need to be respectful of that, and we need to be accepting of that. And it is one of those things. You probably know. I do quite a lot of performance coaching and leadership coaching, and I've got my own small company that does that. And it's a really difficult one to put across in the modern world in large organizations, because that personable acceptance of a risk or of a consequence of an action is dumbed down, I think, in the corporate environment. And what I mean by that, you can happily make mistakes, and you have to do something quite catastrophic these days to be sacked or to be got rid of for making mistakes. Whereas
you just have to talk on social media, say something controversial on social media. That's the way it's gone,
Well, yeah, I mean, potentially, but the thing I'm trying to get to, in the mountains, if you make mistakes, if you don't accept responsibility for the actions that you're making, ultimately you're going to be left high and dry. I mean, the mountain doesn't care who you are. It doesn't matter. It doesn't care if you're an expert. It doesn't matter. Care if you're a first-time beginner on the mountain or whatever. The mountain can kill you regardless. And that's the thing that you have to be accepting of. If you're going to stand up and accept risk, what are the consequences? And unfortunately, no matter how much we try to devalue Everest by huge amounts of oxygen, fixed teams, better knowledge, or whatever it may be, there is always risk. And I got to focus on my client, but also I've got to focus on the ones that are left behind, the ones at home, the children, the family, my wife. And it's easy to say that this is what they've always known, this is what daddy's always done. But at the same time, education is really important. Educate the children, educate my wife, educate family and friends into what the dangers really are. But it's hard. It's super hard being away from the family. And there are times that you've got to deal with the inner demons within yourself.
You've made me think there, I mean, as a dad myself, that my kids ask constantly to go to the park themselves. They want to go, they see that as a big thing, is 8, 6, and 5. They want to walk to the park themselves, especially my daughter who's 8. Every time it's no, you're not going on your own. I'm worried about the roads. I'm worried about who might be out there, this, that, and the other. If my daughter, I'm saying this now, and I'll probably look back on this and maybe it'll be different when she is 18, but if she says, Daddy, I want to go up Everest, that's probably something at 18 years old, I'd probably say, you go for that. You go and attempt that. And I think I would be like that. I think because she's an adult, if she's done the training and she puts the time in, she raises the money and she goes down that route, that's probably something I would say, okay, I'm with you, I'll back you. But right now the mindset is to not release because they bite right outside the house. There's danger of a car on the road. But actually,
the interesting thing you say there, Nashy, is if when she's 18 and she says, I want to climb Everest, and you said, she's put training in, she's got the experience, it's exactly the same as going down the park. If you put the training in, if you've got the experience of being able to cross a road on your own to know what you're doing. Yeah, there's always unknowns. My children come back from school, similar age to yours. Mine are 11 and 9. The whole stranger danger thing and things. There's always going to be unknowns and things you can't control. Mm-hmm. And it's the same in the big mountains. I always say control the controllables. And control them really well. Not just have a grasp on them, but really clutch them and know exactly what they are. Have a plan B, C, and D for the what ifs. And that leaves enough space and hopefully energy to deal with whatever the uncontrollables are. And it's the same with, my children are the same. They want their freedom. They want to go and explore on their own. My daughter wants to jump on a bike and cycle to her friends. And so it's exactly the same as you. To start with, it's like, I know the road's too fast, or it's too dangerous, or you don't have full control over your bike, or whatever it may be. But then over time, you build the experience with them in exactly the same way that I would build the experience with my Everest clients, till you get to the point that you believe that those individuals can legitimately make the journey to Everest, albeit under my guidance and the Sherpa team, or in the case of my daughter, ride round to Atias or whatever it is, a nearby village on her own. At some stage, I'm not preaching to you, but in general, you've got to let go, and people have to find their own path. And that I think is a huge learn. I mean, there's no hacks to that. That's experience. We all look for the hacks in today's society. How can we become high achievers? How can we become superstars or whatever in our own field? And people are constantly looking for the shortcut. It doesn't really exist, I don't believe. You've got to put the time in to gain the experience, and then you have the legitimacy to go out and do whatever it is, be it climb Everest, cross the road, go to the park on your own, cycle around to the nearby village. I mean, the parallels to me and the dangers are pretty obvious.
Have you ever been at base camp or with clients coming in or anything like that where you've realized really early that this person hasn't got the training, hasn't got the potential to get to the summit? Have you ever had to make those difficult calls really early on?
Yeah, so I mean, years ago I used to work in groups. So, a group on Everest, I used to meet them in Kathmandu. I never met these people, sometimes never spoken to them before. I used to work for sort of third-party companies and things like that. And I look back on that, and I can't believe that was a working practice that we believed was legitimate. And it was after like a near miss in 2010 that I changed my working practice. I looked at my own working practice. I looked at the industry on Everest because let's face it, there is an industry on Everest. We should just point out, by the way, the listeners or viewers don't know, I don't just climb Everest for the giggle. I'm an Everest guide. I professionally lead people to the top. And after 2010, I looked at it and I thought the safest, probably most efficient way, and certainly the most fun way of climbing the mountain would be in a very bespoke one-to-one manner, build the expedition around the individual. And I would normally invest, minimum 18 months, 2 years into an individual before I'd even consider going to Everest. So I'm in that really lucky situation whereby I know my client intimately before we even get in country, let alone to the foot of the mountain. We've climbed in Bolivia, we've climbed perhaps in Nepal, we've definitely climbed in the European Alps, possibly climbed in Scotland, in Spain, wherever it may be. And I'm constantly building that relationship with a client because ultimately it's got to be a trusting relationship. I got to know what they're going to do when they're under pressure, when they're stressed, when they're tired, when they're hungry, in exactly the same way that they need to believe in me when I've got to make a decision, certainly about safety, but a go or no go decision. Are we going to go for the summit on this particular date or not? I can bring them into the decision-making process, but ultimately we're relying on my experience and the Sherpa team's experience to make those judgment calls. And that does not come easy. Building that relationship, a trust relationship, like we all know, it takes time. In some cases, it takes years. So I'm really lucky. By the time I get to Everest, or by the time I say to the client, yeah, I think we're ready to go to Everest, I'm pretty damn confident that that individual certainly has a legitimate cause to be there, and hopefully is in the right mindset and physical condition to successfully get up and down Everest. I mean, there was a good friend of mine, Ed Viestas, the American climber, famously once said, getting up is optional, but getting back down is mandatory. And people forget that. They employ me and I always ask the same question, what is it that you want from this project? And they'll say, yeah, I want to get to the top of Everest. Well, actually, my job is to bring you back through the front door at the end of the expedition. Having had loads of fun and hopefully along the way, gain summits. And I think if you build the right culture and you communicate that in the right way, then you've got the right client, and the summits are going to come organically. And I feel very lucky and privileged to be in that situation. And not have to make those difficult calls at the bottom of the mountain.
With your experience on Everest, are there still, you might not want to tell me this, but hopefully you do, are there any stages on the mountain that when you are about to start, when you're at base camp and there's a stage in the mountain that you've got anxiety about, that you don't enjoy, there is actual total fear there at this certain bit? Is there anything on the mountain that you always maybe prepare that a little bit better for, you research a wee bit more, anything like that? Any stages that are always on your mind?
Yeah, I mean, summit day. The mountain, to be honest, is relatively benign if you approach it in the right way and if you're ready for it, until summit day. And summit day, you're starting at Camp 4, which is 8,000 meters above sea level. So this is one of the highest campsites in the world. I mean, there's only 14 points on the planet over 8,000 meters. And we start at 8,000 meters. I mean, it's virtually the height of Annapurna. And that's our starting point. There's no rescue. Yes, we've got technology that gives us pretty accurate weather forecasts these days, but there's always a degree of the unknown. And we step outside that tent late at night, and then normally we leave about 10 o'clock at night and start making our way up towards the summit. And the level of anxiety as a mountain guide with somebody in your charge, and that somebody is going to be way out their comfort zone, and you're professionally leading them into arguably one of the most deadliest environments on the planet. It's stressful. It's properly stressful, because not only are you looking after yourself, you're looking after the Sherpa team, you're looking after the client. You've got all these other things going through your mind at the same time, all the what ifs. And I didn't really realize this until relatively recently. I think my anxiety levels go through the roof. And it's only when I'm I get back down to Camp 2. Hopefully it's the same day as Summit Day. We come all the way back down to Camp 2. Only when we hit that upper section of the Western Coombe, that we come off the Lhotse face, we come off the fixed lines, and we're trudging back to Camp 2. Only then does that tsunami of relief wash over me. And it's, I recorded a little thing, I put it on my Instagram, literally about 2 days ago, whenever. And you can feel the palpable relief. I'm doing this big hell yeah to the camera. And I'm just so elated. And it's not because we've gained the summit. It's not because, of the joy of it. It's simply that stress relief. We've done it. We've brought the client back down. The client, it was a girl this year, Rebecca Louise. She did a great job. And she was out of her comfort zone. We were going above and beyond for her. We bring her back down. And we know that, yes, the next day we've got to get through the Khumbu icefall, but compared with everything else we've done, that's relatively tame. And it doesn't keep me awake. But if there's one aspect of that mountain that were to keep me awake, it's Summit Day. It's stressful, it's dangerous, even with modern technology.
I'm sitting here asking the question, assuming it'll be going over the crevasses on the ladders and all that sort of stuff. I've never heard it being explained like that, how stressful Summit Day can be when you think, obviously, death zone, it has the ultimate risk there, but you think you're just going for this summit. So naively to sit here.
I think because you can get your head around walking across a ladder. You can practice walking across a ladder in your back garden. You put your children's paddling pool up and make fun and games out of it and things like that. You can practice going through ice falls in the European Alps, and there's all these things that you can do. But Summit Day of Everest is unique. There's nothing else I don't think on the planet quite like it. The dangers involved, the amounts of oxygen, how much time you're out there. Even K2. Which I summited last year with a client. Summit Day on K2 compared with Summit Day on Everest. K2 without a shadow of a doubt a harder mountain to climb. It's got a really bad reputation for taking life and things like this, and the stone fall and the avalanches. But like for like, Summit Day on K2 compared with Everest, Everest Summit Day is way more out there, way more stressful. It's longer. There's more obstacles. There's more choke points. It's just on a different level. It really is. Everything else on that mountain, climbing the Lhotse face, going through the Western Coombe, even going through the Khumbu icefall, which you referenced, all the ladders across the crevasses. It's child's play, I think, in comparison to execute in Summit Day in the manner that it needs to be executed in to bring people back down safely. I age about 10 years on Summit Day every single year, and I've only just realised that.
You're looking good. You're looking good for 160.
Very good.
What?
I got a good moisturising regime.
So that fresh air you get up there. What was it like? What were the numbers like on the summit when you were there just last 2 weeks ago? What was it like? Was it busy? Was the mountain busy?
Honestly, it was brilliant. Absolutely bloody brilliant. And the reason why it was so good is we had, the industry had an unprecedented weather window. So just to sort of educate the audience here a little bit, what allows us to climb, or when we can climb Everest, is very, very specific. It's weather dependent, and it's predominantly dependent on what the jet stream does. The jet stream being that high altitude wind that it can be 200 plus kilometers an hour. And when the jet stream is in and around Everest, you cannot climb above 7,500, 8,000 meters. It would literally pluck you off and just throw you off the mountainside. In fact, you can be at base camp. You can certainly be at Camp 2, and you can hear the wind hitting the flanks of the mountain. It sounds like a freight train just constantly in the background. And what normally happens is the monsoon will start to build up in the Bay of Bengal, and as the monsoon becomes more and more powerful, it starts to become the more dominant weather system, and it will start to push the jet stream north. And you have this little power play, and the jet stream starts to break up into what's known as streamers, and you get these weather windows of 3 or 4 days at a time that you can sneak up the mountain and hopefully get back down back down again. And what that can do is funnel all the teams into these little weather windows of, as I mentioned, 2 or 3 days. And then it might be a week when you can't climb and another few days, et cetera, throughout the season. And it funnels the teams to all try the summit on the same day or very close to. This year, I think the first summit was May 7th. That's when the fixing team got to the top. The first sort of commercial client summit, I think, was a few days later, May 10. And then from May 10 onwards, I think there were summits every single day through to May 26th. The jet stream was just not in existence. Now, I don't know if that's climate change or environmental issues or quite what it is, but there was no jet stream. And it meant that teams could summit pretty much at will. So all of a sudden, instead of funneling teams together, all the teams were spread out. So there was absolutely no crowding problems. And we went up on May 15th. So we actually had an abortive attempt on the 14th. We left our high camp. We went about 40 minutes out of high camp and I turned the team around. I just thought it was too windy. It was probably within limits, but I think it was going to detract from the enjoyment of the client and the team. So I made that call that we're going to turn us all around. In itself, quite a stressful call because all the other teams went on up. And then we summited on May the 15th. And I don't know, maybe 30 or 40 people summited that day, which for Everest is not that many. We had 0 wind. Because we climb a lot of it at night. We had one of the clearest nights I've ever had. We were climbing almost under a full moon. There was a lightning storm, I don't know how far away, a couple of 100 miles away. So we had the joy of watching that. The stars were out. As the moon began to set, I saw a shooting star literally streak above the summit. And then when we reached the summit, it was 4:30 in the morning. Only about 3 other people there. And just as we got to the summit, the sun broke the horizon over on your right hand side as you climb up there. It breaks the horizon in Chinese Tibet, and we were granted arguably one of the most stunning sunrises I've ever seen in the mountains. It was jaw dropping. So, in conclusion, our summit day could not have been smoother if we had tried. It was near perfect. It was just spot on. And then the funny thing, I get back to Kathmandu and I was speaking to one of my sort of competitors, or we are competitors, we all vie for the same clients, but at the same time we all know one another, so we're all friends. And I was laughing and joking with Lucas Wilchenbach, the Austrian operator, and he was saying, Kenton, how do you do it? Because he summited on the 13th, I think May 13th. It was pretty windy. And there were crowds there, so they had some hiccups. They had to wait up near the summit to climb the hairy step and things like this, which we hear these stories all the time. And Lucas said, how do you do it? Every time you go for the summit, you get the near perfect day. And I tongue-in-cheek responded, oh, well, I think it's just luck, Lucas. We're up there. And he goes, no, luck is doing it once or twice and getting a near perfect day. There's something more than luck. You are using your experience. You are choosing the day. You are constantly choosing the right day. And for a competitor or another mountain guide to say that, that's possibly the ultimate accolade. And I feel very proud that we chose the day that we did. And I successfully got the client and the Sherpa team up and down on such a special day on the mountain.
And I know how much of a fan, but how appreciative you are about the Sherpa community and your relationship with them, because obviously you've got a lifelong relationship with the Sherpa community, and obviously who was with you on this recent climb to get the 16th summit?
Oh, well, it was Dorji, so Dorji Georgian. So we actually had 5 Sherpas with us this year. So the team consisted of myself and my client Rebecca Louise. We had the Canadian sort of high altitude cameraman filmmaker Elia, and his sort of assistant, who's PK Sherpa. And then so there was 4 of us, and we had a 5-man Sherpa team. And at the head of that Sherpa team was Dorji Georgian, and it was his 20th summit. So I'm 48, and I've got 16 summits now, and Dorji is now, I think he's just turning 40. he might be 40 this year, and he's got 20 summits to his name. I mean, he's one of the super Sherpas. He really is. And we've summited together now, I think 12 times. Summited K2 together, summited Choi Oi together, summited Manaslu together. And there's no way I could do what I do without him. I really couldn't. He is the backbone of our operation out there in the Himalayas. And then beyond that, we had we had Tenji, we had Calm Dorji, who else did we have this year? Chechen, it's 4 of them. And we had this great guy. I hadn't worked with him before. Oh gosh, this is really, really bad. I'm spacing his name. But it was his first summit. He's from Lukla. So most of my Sherpa crew come from Pangboche, which is a little village just down from Everest. But this guy, Zangbu was the first time working with us, and he was from Lukla. He'd never summited before. And honestly, yeah, the smile on his face when we gave him the opportunity of going to the top was from ear to ear. And you could just tell when we got back down to Camp 2, and we were with some of the other Sherpas in Camp 2, you could see the pride just bursting out of him, because for many of the Sherpas, Everest it's a bit of a rite of passage. And Zangbu, up to this point, he'd never had that opportunity. He used to work in the icefall, as what's known as icefall doctor. So to be given the opportunity to go to the top and to be part of that, and seeing this guy blossom into, I have no doubt he's going to have a fantastic career as a high altitude Sherpa. And to be part of that is really special. That was one of the highlights this year, actually. Watching Zangbu show his photographs and tell the other Sherpas about what his experience on Summit Day was like.
Incredible. But forgive me, I didn't pick up the name of the Sherpa that you've summited 12 times with. But
Dorji Gelgin.
What is it about that relationship with him? What is he doing for you in the mountain? How are you inspiring him? What is he like when you were going for the summit and you made the call to turn back? Is he?
Yeah, he couldn't quite get his head down why we were turning around, and it's quite interesting. I mean, these guys are near bulletproof. Yeah. I mean, they make it all possible. They carry the big loads. They don't use anywhere near as much oxygen. I don't think they get the accolade that they really deserve. But Dorji and I, we've worked together for a long time, and we just vibe really well together. And we've been through some great times, and we've been through some pretty tough times, and we've lost friends together. We've been involved in death, specifically 2013, and somebody died in my arms on Lhotse. And he was at my side. Dorji was there giving the psychological support that I needed. I mean, Sherpas don't really dig death. Well, nobody digs death, do they? But they really don't dig death. And that night high on Lhotse, there was no need for Dorji to be part of what was going on. So I kind of, so let him go back to the tent that we had been sharing, and he got some rest that night. And then in the morning, I was somewhat traumatized because Mr. Lee, Taiwanese climber, had passed away literally in my arms throughout, overnight. And I was really struggling with the whole situation. And then there was like the tink, tink, tink of crampons outside the tent, and the door zipper opened, and it was Dorji. This friendly face, his smile sort of came in and just looked at me, and he just said he's dead. And that obvious closure on the situation. And he looked at me and said, what are we going to do? Are we climbing Lhotse? Because we were meant to be climbing Lhotse. And I was wavering a little bit. I didn't quite know what to do. Emotionally quite traumatized. And he just looked at me and said, come on, now we climb. And I think that was indicative of our relationship. He knew what I needed in that moment. And I think going down would have been a mistake. And Dorji knew that. And he was literally just in front of me all the way up, just keeping a careful eye just to make sure that I was in the right mindset and wasn't doing anything stupid that day. And I think for that, I would ever owe him a big dollop of gratitude. I mean, he's met my children, they've hung out together, they've been trekking together. And he's just one of these guys that gets it. He's full of empathy. He's generous. He's incredibly strong. and we complement one another, I think, really well. And he might not have the technical attribute that I might have from all my years of climbing, but you know, he's a powerhouse, and I can't really imagine climbing a big mountain, commercially or otherwise, without him.
Do you mind me asking what happened to that climber? Was it an accident or what went
Mr.
wrong?
Lee, he bought into an outfit that perhaps didn't have the depth of logistical support when it went wrong. And yeah, he essentially died of high altitude cerebral and pulmonary edema, which is an affliction from high altitude. Cerebral edema is essentially swelling on the brain. Pulmonary edema is sort of fluid on the lungs. Both can be fatal. Both to a certain extent treatable, but he had been left up there by his team. He'd been up there about 72 hours before I came across him. So,
or did you found him? You found him on his?
Well,
I
kind of took over. There's an American climber who'd been looking after him that day, because it's complicated how these things sort of pan out. But
yeah,
there was a little bit of knowledge that he was there. An American climber had been with him, you know, earlier in the day, and I kind of took over the situation. And you know, we injected him with dexamethasone, which is a steroid-based altitude drug, which did have an effect. He became coherent a little bit, because he'd been unconscious for a couple of hours when I was with him, but then he deteriorated overnight. And yeah, ultimately, I think his death was totally avoidable. But the logistical team that he bought into weren't being quite as cooperative as they could have been. And I think if they were somewhat quicker acting, then that unfortunate situation would have been avoidable for sure.
How was that at a height where they could get his body off the mountain? How do you deal with that in the death zone, and when you see the bodies in your own relationship with death?
Yeah, so I mean, his body was removed. He was coming down from Lhotse Camp 4, which is not easy, but relatively relatively achievable. I think his body walked down to Camp 3, and it might be chopped out from Camp 3. I'm not entirely sure. For better for worse, I turned my back on the situation by then. I find it quite hard to deal with. But yeah, there are bodies on Everest, and it's really interesting this year actually, because you never can become accustomed to it, and you certainly don't become blasé to it. But there is a body just down from what we still consider to be the Hillary Step. It's been there for a few years now. I think the climber passed away in 2019, perhaps. So they've been there 3 years. And I totally omitted to tell my client this year, Rebecca, that Don's body was there. And it's pretty graphic. And so you come around, you can't see it until you're almost upon it. And then you have to, and sorry if this is a bit graphic for the audience, but you almost have to climb through and over the body, which is, if you're not used to that sort of thing, and you don't have the ability to, and I mean this in a nice way, to sort of switch off from the fact that it was once, you know, a human being, you know, a father, a husband, a son. You have to be able to switch off from that. And I hadn't primed Rebecca, because it sort of, with everything else going on, it sort of slipped my mind. And she came around the corner, saw the body, and it really freaked her out. And we spoke about it afterwards. And I profusely apologized for not forewarning her. And it was really fascinating to see the psychological effect that had on her. And it clearly unhinged and upset her. Whereas I think because, you know, we certainly don't deal in death, but you know, the whole Mr. Lee thing, I've lost a lot of friends in the mountains. I pulled dying Sherpas off fixed lines. So you do get numb to it a little bit. You know, you don't get matter of fact, you don't get complacent to it, but there is a disassociation which I think you have to put in place. There is a mechanism to deal with such situations. So, you know, when this happens, then that mechanism is deployed, and there is, you know, that's somewhat, you know, slight disconnect. It was the same on K2. I mean, we knew there were bodies on K2 from a winter attempt. We knew where they were. because they were found a couple of days previously by a Sherpa team. And again, we had to step very close and almost through the arms of these poor individuals, and that can be traumatizing, especially if you're not hardened to it. So, and I think I use it as a stark reminder that mountains are dangerous, and you've got to remain sharp.
Yeah.
You don't want to be a statistic, on the wrong side of the, air quotes, record book.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Well, thank you.
That's letting everybody down. It's letting the family down. It's letting yourself down, obviously, and letting the team around you. You've got to stay sharp. You've got to be focused, no matter how many times you find it. Because she has the capacity to extinguish life very easily.
Thank you for discussing that, because that can't be easy. I appreciate that. I really do. With the mountain and the number of times you've been, how has it changed? How is the mountain changed in itself? Obviously, with the amount of people that have been on it, but is it very similar to the first time you attempted it, or is it just a completely different mountain to what you remember?
Yeah, I mean, obviously the mountain's the same, and the mountain will be the same long after we've all gone. I mean, that said, it's lost the Hillary step that disappeared. We think in the earthquake in 2015. Although there's still the steepening of the slope, but the industry has changed a lot, and I wouldn't say it's changed for better or for worse. It's changed. It's developed over time. Technology has seeped in. We're now connected with smartphones. You get Wi-Fi at base camp, and you can be fully connected there, and that brings its own dimension to these expeditions. The clientele has changed as well, and I think everybody has their own legitimate reason to go to these mountains, and that should always be respected. And I think the advent of all these new technology, especially helicopters, and the delivery systems got better. The option delivery systems got better. The Sherpa teams have become a lot more competent and more adept, with a better understanding of the mountain. Weather forecasting's got better. The rope fixes have got better, and the rope fixing is better. And above all, I think generally as an industry, we have a better understanding about what the average paying customer or client or climber needs on the mountain, and that's provided. And it's very easy for the naysayers to say, well, that devalues the mountain. Well, it doesn't. It's just different. It's different to the beast that I climbed back in 2004 for the first time. Physically, it's still virtually as hard, but I think mentally, it's an easier mountain to climb for the average person that's going there. And the people out there say, well, yeah, but it doesn't represent true adventure anymore. It represents adventure to the individuals who want to go there. And if that doesn't resonate with somebody else, well, that's fine. We're all different people, and there's so much new adventure left in the mountains. I mean, there's more unclimbed 6,000 to 6,500 meter peaks in the pool than there are climbed. So if Everest doesn't float your boat, well, you go to a myriad of other mountains. But Everest is it's still very popular for a lot of people, and understandably so. There's only one point on the planet that's the highest point, and that's Everest.
Yeah.
And there's a whole industry around that. And if that's a turn off, well, I understand that. I sympathize to a degree. I mean, I'm part of it, so I can't be too hypocritical. But there's plenty of other options that you can go to and not be part of that industry. Because it is an industry without a shadow of a doubt. And then now some of the other 14 8,000 meter peaks are, well, if not all of them now, are commercialized, which even 5 years ago was almost considered impossible. To have a legitimate industry on mountains such as K2 or Kanchenjunga or Nanga Parbat. If you asked me 10 years ago, I'm like, you're probably kidding me. Whereas now, it's legitimate. It's there.
With when I had Nims on the show, he talked about Nims style, and he talked about the parties at base camp, and he talked about the drinking and culture. What are you like when you get down off a mountain? Do you like to celebrate? Do you like to have a drink?
Yeah, I mean, generally I'm teetotal on the mountain. I probably drink too much beer at home anyway. I'm a beer lover. I love experimenting with different beers and things like that. I don't drink to excess. Don't get me wrong. And I hate being drunk, but I like a beer. But that said, yeah, I mean, there's always a place to celebrate. Nims. I mean, I'm very, very fond of Nims. I think he's doing great things for Nepal, and I'm not seeing his 14 peaks, but what he did is really quite remarkable. I don't fully subscribe to Nims style when it comes to clients. It certainly works for Nims, but Nims is a fairly unique individual. I mean, his stamina and his reserves and his just the way that he can approach the mountain. There's almost nobody else on the planet that can do that sort of thing. So the whole Nims style with clients, I think you've got to be a little bit cautious with. And yeah, I mean, hey, everybody likes to party from time to time. I genuinely withhold my partying until I'm back to Kathmandu. Yeah, I mean, I've partied at base camp in the past, and it certainly certainly makes a hangover pretty rough the next day, being at altitude, put it that way. So yeah, I kind of been there, I've done that. I don't feel that I particularly need to partake in that anymore.
And how does the summer look for you? Is it straight back out there, out in adventures, or what's going to happen now?
So I'm off to Alaska in a few weeks' time, and then the summer. I'm not going to Pakistan this year. Well, I'm not going to climb. I'll probably go late summer. I want to recce a potential race out there that I want to put on, which I think will be fantastic. I mean, Pakistan is such an amazing country. But before I go to Pakistan, I'll be working in the European Alps. I'm a fully qualified IFMGA mountain guide, which means I can work all over Europe, or well, I could work there before Brexit. But in theory, I can still work all over Europe. So things like Matterhorn and Eigers, I'll probably do a couple of those this year. Guiding in the European Alps in summertime is a delight. It's beautiful. I don't do that much of it these days. So when I get the opportunity, it's something I absolutely I adore. It's really good fun. Great bang for your buck in terms of how much climbing you get done. And then beyond that, I relatively recently launched a performance coaching company, Cool company, and it's all building awareness around that and building the company for the first time ever. We've got full-time employees, which is a novelty and a bit of a head stress in its own way. So yeah, we're on that money burn phase of essentially a startup. So quite a lot of energy is going to be put into that this summer.
Just quickly, how's that leading people on Everest to leading people in a sort of office business environment? Are you good at? Do you use the same skills to do different things? How do you adapt yourself to go from one extreme to a relatively safe environment?
Yeah, so I mean, there's similar parallels. Yeah. When I go to somewhere like Everest, or say the Matterhorn, or the Eiger, or whatever it may be, it's all about trying to nurture the very best out of the individual. We're navigating an environment that individual perhaps isn't used to, perhaps hasn't had the ability to invest the amount of time or energy to gain the experience. And that's what a mountain guide does. He or she will come in and A, keep them safe, but B, elevate the experience that they're going through in the mountains. And it is not that dissimilar to what I would do in the boardroom, or what my team would do, in the corporate environment. We use very similar techniques in terms of how we can pull out all the positives from an individual or from a team, and then work out where the shortfalls are, where the negatives are, and put building blocks in place to safeguard that, you know, the negatives or the shortfalls, you know, aren't going to hiccup all the positives, and then we can focus on the positives. And yeah, performance coaching is, you know, in the same way that climbing big mountains is, it's incredibly satisfying for me as an individual. I mean, to see somebody fulfill their own ambition climbing Everest, or seeing a team, you know, outperform any expectation that they ever had in the boardroom or in the corporate environment is, you know, selfishly incredibly satisfying. You know, 10 years ago, you asked me, or 15 years ago, selfishly, it was all about me and my own climbing. Whereas as I've grown up and I've, you know, invested time in myself to try to be a better version of myself. You know, I hate that term actually, but, you know, I've invested time in myself, and I've realized what's important to me. And it's not necessarily climbing big mountains or hard technical peaks just for me anymore. It's sharing that experience and my knowledge with others. And because, let's face it, my experience has been hard fought over over decades, and there's priceless learnings there. And if I can overlay that onto other people and to elevate them, then I can't really think of a more satisfying thing, be it in the mountains or be it anywhere else. So there are some great parallels. And as I say, I mean, I find it, they're super satisfying. You know, doing what I do, and, you know, even a simple keynote. And, you know, thank goodness, you know, keynotes going back to being face to face rather than virtual. If I go in and give a keynote and it resonates, and you know when it resonates, and you walk away knowing that you've done a good job, and there's going to be key messages and takeaways, and you're going to make, even if it's just one person out of an audience of 20, 30, or 100, then you've made a difference. And if you are in that position to make a difference, then you're leaving something behind. You know, you're not just doing something for yourself anymore, and that is empowering. It really is. So yeah, anyway, I love the performance coaching, and as I say, yeah, I think this summer, you know, I need to sort of focus a little bit more on the business side of things, and we've got a great team working with us, and yeah, fingers crossed we can, you know, touch the lives of individuals and teams, and help them develop and grow, and yeah, you know, attain a performance which they thought was unattainable before we got involved.
I'm sure it will be a huge success, like all your expeditions. A quick shout out for our mutual friend. We're both friends with Molly Hughes. You're obviously on Everest with Molly.
Molly, yeah. I've not seen Molly for now. There's somebody, you know, there's somebody that's totally legitimate in just the way that she goes about doing stuff. I mean, the thing that Molly did that impressed me more than anything else was her solo Antarctic trip, and I thought that was properly worthy. I really did, because there's a lot of fluff out there in the adventure world these days, in the climbing world, but there's somebody that is not only grounded, but going out doing some impressive stuff. Yeah, I've not seen Molly for a long time.
Yeah, she's doing well. She's a co-owner of an adventure company out here in East Lothian, just outside Edinburgh. So I see a bit more of her these days, but she's she's in great form. She's got a new book coming out.
So oh well, fantastic. Well, I mean, if you see a high fiver from me, please do. And yeah, I've got time for that young girl. She's yeah, she's done some good stuff.
Absolutely. And yourself, finally, you were at the Jubilee. Were you racing Land Rovers? Were you racing Land Rovers with your young laddie, or were you just out and about cruising?
No, so we were at the we were so lucky. So I'm supported by Jaguar Land Rover, very lucky, and they invited myself and my son, who's only 9, to be part of the Queen's pageant on Sunday, part of the Jubilee procession. And we were in a 1948 production Series 1 Land Rover, number 7 ever built, left-hand drive, worth apparently nearly £1 million.
Wow,
unbelievable! And yeah, what a day! What a amazing day! I mean, I've got the utmost respect for the Queen and her values and what she stood for, and, you know, the great things that she's done. So to be part of that celebration was really quite special. And yeah, and there's a great synergy between sort of the Queen and Everest and climbing in a way, because the news of the first ascent of Everest was broken on her coronation day in 1953. Back in the day, there was obviously no email and things, and word came back from a runner, and it was in code, and then it was sent by telegram back to London from Kathmandu, and news broke on her coronation day. So there's forever going to be this sort of connection between Everest and the Queen and her reign, and it was beautiful, absolutely beautiful to be part of that a couple of days ago.
Amazing, well deserved. And Kenton, thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate it.
Absolute pleasure. So it's been a nice conversation. So thank you for the invite. I really appreciate it.
Anytime. No, we'll do this again sometime. Thank you so much.
Thanks, my friend.
Dig over here, this side, just dig in there. Just go away. Well done, mate.